Thank you for joining us. Open up your Bibles and turn with me to John chapter 18. Just as we always do, just a context reminder where we're coming from in John chapter 17. He is still talking after the Last Supper. They're probably in the Garden of Gethsemane. Chapter 17 ends Jesus' final farewell speech. In chapter 18, we move into the narrative. So basically like a storytelling now. So chapter 18, verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, so that these words, that's this long farewell speech and teaching that he gave to his disciples, starting from the Last Supper, upper room, and then going many chapters. When Jesus had spoken these words, Jesus, went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. So here, Brook Kidron, the Kidron Valley is constantly mentioned in Old Testament. So it's definitely a real place. And here we have a map. And so here we can actually see that this is probably where the upper room is, which is where their Last Supper might have been. And then we'll see that they crossed over kind of a little brook going through the valley. And we're guessing that the Garden of Gethsemane is probably somewhere over here. So there is a little bit of a walking. So maybe when he said, rise up and let's go, a couple chapters ago, maybe they were like walking and talking for a while. So they're in this garden. In John, it doesn't mention the name, but we know from the other Gospels, this is commonly known as Garden of Gethsemane. And he's known to go there frequently. And so he's not hiding. He's going to a place that he goes a lot to. Verse 2, now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Jesus isn't going to any new place. If you're trying to hide from being arrested, you're not going to go to your house, your workplace, or like your favorite cafe. So it'd be like going to the mall food court that you often hang out, or like you're a regular at this restaurant. And so Jesus goes to the place where he is normally found and is basically saying, all right, I'm ready. This is where you can find me. This is where you can take me. Verse 3, so Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. All right, so here, first of all, Judas himself, he's the one who's trying to ask for support. He's like, I need backup. I need men. I need some force. And so it's interesting because all this time Judas was with Jesus. Either he misunderstood Jesus' nature. Had he really known Jesus, he would have known that Jesus would have willingly came. Like, you don't need more muscle. You don't need weapons. Like, Jesus is not going to put up a fight. The other thing is, if Judas really knew who Jesus Christ was, God's son, like, he would know that no matter how many human military soldiers you have, you could not beat him in an all-out fight. So there seems to be multiple levels of misunderstanding. Either Judas doesn't really truly know Jesus' personality and his willingness and his goal. His whole goal is to surrender and to die. So either he still doesn't really fully understand that, or he doesn't really understand that Jesus is the Son of God, truly is God, and his legions and legions of angels would just decimate any human army. And so here they're saying the band of soldiers. A lot of scholars have put in a lot of effort into researching this term. Some people say it's a unit of 200 plus cavalry or 600 foot soldiers or even up to 1,000. So a lot of people are wondering how many people are in this group, because in a lot of our storybooks or cartoons, we see maybe a group of 10 or 15 people. But a lot of people who study this specific term that is used in the Greek, they say that it's at least 200, up to 1,000 men. When I read that, I was like, that's a little much. That's like, really? You felt like you needed that many people? So for me, just for my brain, I just imagine about, all right, I'll take the lowest end. So I'll take about 200, which still I think is just way too much. Like, 200 soldiers showed up at a food court or like a outdoor park that I'm having some coffee with my friends, and knowing that I'm peace loving, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to come with you. You don't need 200 people. So that's kind of how I'm trying to envision it in my head. And then not only did he find these soldiers, they're officers and soldiers from the chief priests and the Pharisees. So these are like joint forces. So basically he's getting military people from two different agencies, if you want to think that. So basically it's like a joint effort. You can think like the Navy and the Army, or you think like NATO plus UN, or just two. Usually they have their own independent groups, and now they're both coming in jointly supplying soldiers. So there's like joining of different resources. And then they're not coming empty-handed. They're coming with lanterns and torches and weapons. So it's nighttime. So we do know that. So lanterns and torches, like maybe they thought he would be hiding. Or maybe they thought they had to look for him in the corners, in the dark places, in the alleys. Meanwhile, Jesus is like, no, I'm just out in the open in a garden that I frequently go to. I'm just standing here ready. Like, please just take me. And then they have weapons. Like, clearly they're like, I'm coming to fight you. Maybe they thought there was going to be some all-out battle or some type of force. And so these people are coming in with a very different expectation to what Jesus is planning for. So then verse 4, then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward. So Jesus himself proactively steps forward to the group, the band of people, and said, so he's also the first one who spoke. So Jesus proactively spoke first and said to them, whom do you seek? Verse 5, so then the group of the band of soldiers with Judas, they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. And the I am he here is the ego eimi, which is the Greek version of I am, which essentially is that declaration of divinity, like I am God. So as soon as he says this, Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. So Jesus is saying, I am he, I am, to Judas along with the band of many, many soldiers. Verse 6, when Jesus said to them, I am he, the declaration of divinity, I am, they drew back and fell to the ground. So just by speaking, these, let's say 200 men, let's go for the lowest end. These 200 men all together just got overwhelmed and then fell. Like as though they could not take this revelation simply from God's word of revealing his majesty and his true identity as God. That is a common reaction in Old Testament or New Testament when a human meets God or experiences his majesty. Usually they fall down. So in this instance, it's not that the earth suddenly shook, but it was intentional because Jesus spoke, I am he, I am. And then this whole group all together, not just one or two, all together falls back. They all fall down. It's a common reaction that we see in the Bible to some divine revelation or some glory or majesty suddenly being revealed, where as a human, we just cannot stand in front of that. So they all fell down. Verse 7, so he asked them again. So this is funny, right? They're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? They're trying to get up, stand back into formation. And Jesus asked them a second time, whom do you seek? And they answered the same way. And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And Nazareth here, instead of saying Jesus the rabbi, Jesus from Galilee, Jesus Christ, right? They're specifically using Jesus of Nazareth, which is kind of a scorn. If you remember, people are like, what good things can come out of Nazareth? Like a backwater town, it's like Jesus of that tiny little town that has nothing worth any value. So it's a scorn. Verse 8, Jesus then answered again, I told you that I am he. I told you that I am. And you notice this time, the second time that he says it, they don't fall back. So it's not that, oh, okay, well, I got used to it, or they're holding on to each other. Many scholars do think that the first time Jesus said, I am, that was an intentional, conscious choice. That Jesus was like, if I wanted, just by my words, you guys would never even be able to stand. It was a conscious effort. With my words, simply by revealing my true identity, even a portion, a sliver of my reveal would have knocked you all down. So kind of like an expression of understand really who I am. The second one, he understands, but this has to happen. This crucifixion has to happen, the arrest, which starts with the arrest. So he goes, I am he. And now the second time, Jesus chose, I'm not going to do the knocking over along with the words that I say. I'm just going to express verbally, I am he. And then he continues, so if you seek me, let these men go. So he's with his other 11 disciples, right? So he's like, I am the one. We don't need to fight. We don't need to wrestle around. And I've already shown you, I can, with one word, I can knock you guys all over. So just take me and keep my disciples safe. In verse 9, John explains, gives a parentheses footnote, verse 9, this was to fulfill the word that he had spoken, that Jesus had spoken before. Of those whom you gave me, God the Father, you gave me, I have lost not one. So this was referring back to chapter 17 when Jesus is like, I didn't lose a single one of the people, the little sheep that you gave me, except for Judas, who himself chose to follow Satan. And also when Jesus keeps talking about how he's the good shepherd, he's like, I didn't lose any sheep. So Jesus is trying to say, just take me, do not harm any of the disciples, so that continually nobody who follows me will be lost. Verse 10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And so here we think that the sword is probably like a short sword that you can hide under a garment, as opposed to those long soldier swords. It's a little bit longer than a dagger, but shorter than military swords that we usually see on the Roman soldiers in those drawings. So he had a sword, draws it, and strikes the high priest servant's right ear, slice off the right ear. There's a lot of interesting discussions about, okay, does that mean then John is right-handed? Did he attack from the back or did he come from the front? Maybe he came from the front and he was actually trying to stab him, but then the servant ducked or tried to move, and then so he then sliced off the ear. Or he came from the back, kind of being like not really honest, and John attacked from the back and then sliced off the ear, but that wouldn't make sense because they're kind of facing each other right now. So there's a lot of speculation on the sword choreography between Peter and this servant. But regardless, this servant's name was Malchus, and this is the only gospel book that records his name. And there's been research about this name too. It seems like some people think it might be an Arabic name, so maybe this was a Gentile, a non-Jew slave, a servant. People also have speculated this person might later have become Christian himself, because usually you wouldn't have known the name unless later somehow he's involved and connected to these people that are writing the New Testament. Otherwise, who would know their name? And now John doesn't record this, but in the other Gospels, it does say that Jesus immediately heals the ear. So I could understand why at first he was attacked by Peter, but then he was healed personally as a miracle by Jesus Christ. So I could see how this person probably is willing to become Christian, and after he does become Christian, has a pretty legit testimony, just like Lazarus, right? Just like the blind man who was healed. He's like, my ear was grown back immediately by Jesus Christ. And I was there either against my will because I'm just a servant, and then this happened, and I saw Peter, who later becomes a big apostle and church father, church leader. He's like, he sliced my ear, but then Jesus said no, he wants to do this in peace. So I could see this guy being like a really key witness, key testimony later on in the church. So I would not find it surprising to think that this person maybe did become Christian later on. So then verse 11, so Jesus said to Peter, put your sword into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? So when we're kids and we think about it, we think, okay, Jesus rebuking Peter, like, stop it. You're being too rash. You're being too emotional. Stop this. This is not my plan. But another commentator was like, actually, this move was done perhaps to protect Peter from a violent escalation, because that was the first physical hit, right? So then absolutely the soldiers can now say, he fired first. And then they can now just start clashing. And Jesus doesn't want that. He doesn't want definitely his disciples to be dying. He definitely does. He also doesn't want these Roman soldiers or these Jewish soldiers that were deployed, probably not by their own will, just assigned by the chief priests and the Pharisees, to also get hurt in all this. Jesus is like, my plan is to be arrested. Okay, so we don't need unnecessary bloodshed and fighting. And he also says, should I not drink the cup? And this cup, the idea, it's a metaphor for death, right? That symbolizes God's wrath. So shall I not drink this wrath that requires my death as the payment, which that my Father, God the Father, has given to me? So this cup is not from human, it's from God. It's God's righteousness requires this. So he's asking Peter, am I not supposed to take it? I want to take it. It's from God. My Father and I, we have this plan. I want to receive it. I'm going to accept it. What are you doing? If you're preventing them to arrest me, then I cannot complete this plan. And this plan is going to work, whether you like it or not. Verse 12, so the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. So I think this is interesting. Jesus literally is not resisting arrest. He's like, let's not fight. I'm going to come with you now. So why are they tying him up? Like, he's literally not running anywhere. He's not fighting you. And yet they were like, maybe he's going to be dangerous. Yeah. Let's still tie him up.
That's probably their false sense of security.
Right. And like, if he could knock you down with just two words, I am.
Still not good.
You're still not clicking. And then it's like, well, let me tie you up with some human-made ropes.
Yeah, with some rope.
With some rope.
I would have put tape on his mouth.
Tape on his mouth. Let me duct tape it. Maybe he can't say anything.
Yeah, false sense of security.
Exactly. His false sense of security. And then verse 13, first they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas. So there's been a lot of studies and archaeology about kind of the path, the footpath, because he's coming from the garden. They bind him up, they tie him up, and then first they take him to Annas, who is not the current high priest. So this is interesting because he used to be the high priest back in like AD year 6 to year 15, but now we are around year 29 to 31, 33. So he's no longer the official high priest, but he is so powerful. So back then there were 3 main families that controlled the high priest position. And this is really sad, but I guess not surprising. Nothing new under the sun. This position shouldn't have been like a political fight, but it is because it comes with a lot of power and political pull. And then of course, because they also control the treasury of the temple, there is going to be money. There's going to be a lot of money that could be
flowed their way.
Yep, that can be
Controlled.
Yep, either honestly or underground or whatever it is. So there were 3 main families, and Annas was one of the 3 families that was extremely strong influence and control over this high priest position. Now, Caiaphas is the current high priest. So Caiaphas is the high priest from AD year 18 through 36. So Caiaphas is the current high priest, but Caiaphas is married into this family, and that's why Annas is the father-in-law. So Annas' own sons, he had 4 sons, they all became high priests. He was able to put them all in as high priest. And then later on, he got his daughter's husband, his son-in-law, to also go in. So essentially, you can imagine this is kind of like a drama or something, or a kingmaker drama, a historical drama, where the family patriarch controls basically the entire game plan. And he is forced to step down because Rome switches it. So Rome switches the position quite frequently, but he's able to influence Rome. So he's like, put my guy in, put my other guy in, put my other son. I ran out of sons. Okay, put my son-in-law now. So this guy has extreme amount of power, really is the guy controlling behind the scenes. And so you could see they don't take him to the official high priest, the one currently in the position, like the one currently in the Senate's office, the one currently in the White House, the one currently in the official position. They take him to this guy's house, the father-in-law's house, and that's how prominently this man is and how much control he has over the entire situation. This is also private, right? It's to his private home. So whatever's happening now is not even officially documented. Wow. So there can be a lot of corruption that is happening, right? So before they even go to the official high priest's office, they're going to the father-in-law's office first, or his house, basically. So they first led him to Annas, he's the father-in-law, who was the high priest that year. Verse 14, it was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. So this is back in chapter 11. Remember when the blind man was healed and more people were believing, yes. And all the people were like, oh no. And then Caiaphas, not because he himself was holy, but because of the position he was in, unintentionally said, it's better for one man to die than for more to die. And he meant it negatively, like, let's kill this innocent man so we don't have to deal with him. But God, knowing all things and able to control all things, is able to actually use it as prophecy, because it is true. Jesus will die for all men, and it is that his sacrifice benefits many, many more to come. So John here is giving us a little footnote reminder. This was that Caiaphas, by the way. Verse 15, Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. So yeah, there's a lot of questions. Who is this other disciple? So many people think it's John the author himself, the one who usually says the disciple whom Jesus loved. Instead of calling himself the one whom he loved, here he just calls him another disciple. But it is weird, then why not just say the disciple whom Jesus loved? Why not just keep using the same title? Why are you using a different one? Some people say maybe it's a non-apostle, so maybe it's not one of the 11, but they're part of the ruling class, like a Nicodemus. That's why they have access to the high priest later. We see that he's able to walk into the high priest office. Like all of us, we need like a tour pass to get into the Capitol building, but maybe he's some guy who works at the Capitol building, so he's just swiping a badge to walk in. So we don't know. A lot of people think it's John. Some people think it's maybe somebody else from the ruling class that's having easy access. So Peter is following Jesus and this other person. Since that disciple, this another disciple, was known to the high priest, so somehow he's connected and known, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. So think about like security. He's able to just walk through. So the band of soldiers plus Judas is having their person arrested, taking Jesus in. And because this other disciple is known, he's able to follow the group right in. But Peter is unknown, so he can't get in. So he's standing outside whatever the security entrance, guard entrance is. Verse 16, but Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple, either John or this ruling class non-apostle person, this other disciple already got through the TSA or security, whatever. Then this other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went back out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. So basically the guy walks through, realizes, oh wait, Peter got blocked at the security, comes back for Peter, tells the servant girl who's guarding the door, hey, he's good, he's with me, let him in. So this servant girl who's outside guarding the door, verse 17, the servant girl at the door said to Peter, you also are not one of this man's disciples, are you? So she asks it in kind of like negative question form, which I can understand. And Peter would be like, oh, I think I should answer no then, right? So she asks, like, you're not with them, right? You're not with Jesus, right? And so Peter said, he said, I am not. Now, I think it's interesting because wouldn't the other disciple also be known? If it was John, then it would be really obvious that John is also with Peter and Jesus. So if the girl didn't ask John, who's the other disciple, but asked Peter, then to me, I think that means that the other disciple is probably not John. But who knows? Maybe John hid it really well, or maybe he was so high up the chain that the servant girl didn't dare ask him.
Because it's saying you also are not. So like
right.
This other man is not. So
right.
You're not either.
You're not
right?
either.
So that's how I read it.
Right, exactly. No, it's really good clues because it's like, yeah, well then I feel like John, the Apostle John, is so well known that because they're always together. They used to be fishermen, right? So why would the Apostle John have some higher connection to the ruling class, right? And they're both fishermen because they had a company. Apparently the two families had both two brothers. So the four men had a like fishing business together. So then all four of them got called to be Jesus' disciples. So they're together all the time. And so why would one be known, the other not be known? Mm-hmm. And then Peter be known to be the disciple. Exactly. And using the also, because he's like, hey, he's with me. And so if she's like, you're not also, right? Then she's connecting him. So you're right. But there's a lot of people who are like, I think it's just John himself. But to me, I'm like, well, then why doesn't he just use the whom God loved? Like, why doesn't he just use the same title term, right? Like, why change your name in between, right? So verse 18, now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. And a lot of TV shows, they'll say it's like outside, but this is now inside the door because now Peter got let in, right? So now Peter, along with this other disciple, along with Jesus, along with all these officers, they are now inside the security area. And it's cold. So even inside palaces back then, they didn't have heaters. They just had to burn fire. So it could be indoors, it could be in a courtyard. But now we're past the security. We're inside this area of the high priest's office. So now, because it was cold, there was a charcoal fire, and the servants, officers, along with Peter, they're warming themselves, right? Because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves around this charcoal fire. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. So this is the scene around the charcoal fire. But then simultaneously, we have the interaction now between Jesus being tied down with a bunch of the soldiers and Judas probably next to him, stand now in front of the high priest. Verse 19, the high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. They call him the high priest, but he's actually not the high priest. He's the father-in-law. He was the old high priest. But now we see, even though he is not the official high priest, this is how they're still documenting him. So like, he's not the king, but they're still calling him the king. So he's the one with the real power. So verse 19,
respected.
Yeah, he's very well respected, feared, and in control. He's really the mastermind. So verse 19, this high priest, even though they call him the high priest, this is Annas and not Caiaphas. So we're still in the first location right now. So the high priest, the retired high priest, then questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. So it's interesting that his first starting point is theological rather than political. Although later it will become political, but right now his main thing is, okay, let's talk about the theological thing. What are you teaching? Verse 20, Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temples where all Jews come together, which is totally true. And we see this when John records it in all the Gospels, it tells where he is speaking, and it'll say synagogues. And in fact, Jesus started preaching in the synagogues, in the temples. He started in Jerusalem. It wasn't until when they started arresting him and trying to stone him did he then back out into outskirts, rural areas. But initially, he always went into the synagogue to preach. And he's like, that's where all Jews come together, especially during the feast. That's where everybody gathers. And so he's like, I have said nothing in secret. Verse 21, why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. They know what I said. So His point is not that he never has private conversations, but the whole idea is whatever I say in private and in public, it's the same. I'm constantly talking about the same message. But he's also saying, I'm not guilty of some secret plan or some secret sinister conspiracy, like I'm trying to overthrow you. Like, I'm not. Everything that I speak in private and in public has always been the same message. And it's interesting because he's like, I know you know. Like, Jesus obviously knows. Like, why else did you bind me? Why else did you arrest me? You know what you're binding me for, right? So Jesus like, ask everybody around. I have so many witnesses. There are so many witnesses that know what I've said. Verse 22, when Jesus had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand. So the idea of striking, people think it's probably, instead of like a punch, more like a slap or a blow from the flat of the hand, either palm or back of hand, but like a really hard smack, saying, is that how you answer the high priest? And so this is the beginning of Jesus now receiving any type of physical assaults and mockery and ridicule. So this is kind of where it starts. And it does say in Isaiah chapter 50, verse 6, it does prophesy that Jesus does get struck. Verse 23, Jesus answered him, if what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. So here he is trying to allude to the law in which this officer probably struck him for. There's a law in Exodus chapter 22, verse 28, that says basically if anybody blasphemies or disrespects the high priest office. And so Jesus is like, okay, if that is what I'm doing wrong, bear witness, bring evidence, bring proof, give a testimony that I have violated. But Jesus is saying, I didn't do it. He's denying that he ever violated that law in Exodus. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me? Verse 24, Annas then sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. So Annas now is like, all right, whatever. You're not answering to me. We're going to escalate this. He's not like, oh, okay, you're right. You didn't do anything wrong. We're going to just let you go. Like, he's like, okay, let's see. You think you can get out of it? We're going to make it official. I'm going to send you, instead of the back house deals, you know, the secret deals that we do in the house. All right, I'm going to send you to the official high priest office at Caiaphas. And we know because of chapter 11 that they already had plans to kill him, even if he was innocent. We already know there's a plan, like a dishonest plan
right.
to trap him.
Well, this is nice. I think it highlights that this is not about following the law or what's right or wrong. It's just them doing it because they want to. Mm-hmm. They don't have a reason. They're not justified.
Right.
He didn't, he's like, I feel like he's repeatedly pointing back to the law that they say they're following and keeping. He's like, you can see that I am following it.
Right.
You're just doing this because
you're
you
doing
want
it.
to do it.
Yeah. Even if you're trying to quote go back to Exodus and Levitical law, like you still don't have ground.
You still don't. Yeah.
Right. And this is all just this show so that you can achieve your plan.
Correct.
Right.
Like showing off power. Like
yes.
the fact that they're bringing all, they brought all the men and all of that just keeps going back to like showing that,
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Unnecessary power that they want to.
Yeah, it is a power trip. You're right. It's like you wouldn't stop and you wouldn't comply and you won't bow down to me. You're telling me, I'm in the high priest office, that you're the son of God. You're some important son of God from heaven. Well, let me show you what I can do. Let me show you my strength, my arms, my military power, my connections to Rome. You're right. It's totally power trip.
Mm-hmm.